and welcome back to Lisa at the Edge. It's been a minute since I last posted on my YouTube, but I'm back. And I'm back with a very exciting session. I've got my teammates on with me today, and we're going to talk a little bit about what was announced at Microsoft Ignite in November. And we're going to give a bit of a summary of the key announcements for Azure Stack HCI and Azure Arc related to Azure Stack HCI. So we're going to do a bit of summary on that, and then also just have a general chit chat and a catch up and share our thoughts on the announcements. So I'm going to bring on my teammates now. We've got Jaromir and Jayanth and Kenny. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning, guys.
Hello. We also we've got other people in our team, but either it's an unfriendly hour for them. In fact, yeah, that's the reason why most people aren't here. It's an unfriendly hour. We're a global team, and so it's hard sometimes to get us all together at a friendly time. But happy to have you guys here. Let's just do a quick round of announcements, introductions, and Kenny, if you just want to do a quick overview of our team as well, that would be grand. And then let's just get stuck into what happened at Ignite. So Kenny, I'll let you go first.
Okay, well, Kenny Lowe, you can see my Twitter handle on the screen as well, so feel free to follow me and all of us as well. I have the privilege of signing off the holidays and expenses for the Global Engineering Outreach Specialists team focused on our partner-aligned HCI portfolio at Dell. That includes the Azure Stack portfolio of products. We as a team are here to basically drive mindshare and growth of the Azure Stack portfolio for Dell, for Microsoft, and to help our customers, partners, and internal teams understand and get the most out of the Microsoft Hybrid Cloud portfolio. Myself, I've been working with Azure Stack since, well, before Azure Stack Hub was first announced and back on storage space and things like that back in the Azure Pack days. So getting a bit long in the tooth now, probably seen it all from an Azure Stack perspective, I think. I have worked in the MSP space. I've worked at Dell now for almost 4 years now, I guess. That must be about right. And I've been a Microsoft MVP for the last 5 years as well. So very passionate about this space, passionate about the community, and passionate about sharing and enabling.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kenny. And then over to Jaromir. Jaromir recently joined our team, so he's a new face for you all. Jaromir, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, guys. So hopefully I'm not on a new face. I've been in Microsoft for 10 years, and I was working as a PFE/CE. PFE stands for Premier Field Engineer, and CE is Customer Engineer. It was just rebranded. What I was doing for the last 5 years is I developed a tool. You maybe know, hopefully you do, and if you're not, please type MS Lab into the Google or Bing, and you will find there's a GitHub tool that will let you set up infrastructure on your laptop, and it's really fast. And this way you can simulate almost anything regarding Azure Stack HCI/Windows Server 2022. And storage spaces direct. So last 5 years, I spent my time doing this mostly at night, and now I can do it as my job for this team.
Awesome. We're super glad that you joined the team, Jaromir. And then we've got Jayanth, who is not on camera with us today, unfortunately, but we've got an excellent photo of him here. So thanks, Jayanth.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, Lisa. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Cool. So yeah, myself, Jayanth, I've been part of this wonderful team for the last 3 years now. So Azure Stack, I've been working on the Microsoft products for quite some time. Started off with SCCM and SCVMM, and then the Azure Stack. So I've been a Microsoft fan for quite a long time, I would say. And I would say, I've been at Dell for a pretty long time. I mean, 12 years. So that's been too long. So yeah, but I've been enjoying my journey so far. It's been a wonderful ride so far. Like I said, so I'm really enjoying the work that we're doing here. Excited to see what's coming up next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jayanth. And I suppose since I've been missing in action for a few months, I'll do an introduction on myself as well. So my name is Lisa Clark. I am a Microsoft MVP. I was awarded in 2021. Yeah, I shouldn't have taken such a long break, I tell you. My brain's gone to mush. Yeah, I kicked off Lisa at the Edge in 2020 when we were in the midst of lockdown, and I had a lot of time on my hands as a way to connect with my teammates and my colleagues and friends out in the community and chat to really awesome people from the Microsoft community all across the world. And I've really enjoyed that, so I'm really excited to get back into it. And yeah, let's kick off. So I think before we get into the Ignite announcements, I think we need to talk about or try and describe what is Azure Stack HCI. So I'm going to give it a go, but then if any of you guys want to jump in with your thoughts or ways that you've found that it's quite helpful to people to explain what this is, because it's a new thing, it's a new concept, then just jump in. So the way that I like to explain what Azure Stack HCI is it's a new purpose-built operating system for hyper-converged infrastructure. We describe it as a fork in the road from Windows Server, focused on stripping it down and focusing on just being for hyper-converged infrastructure. But the most exciting thing about the Azure Stack HCI operating system is that it is delivered as an Azure service. You consume it as an Azure service from the Azure portal, and with that comes all the benefits that I think we're going to cover and touch upon today. The fact that it is then an Azure resource, and then all the magic that follows as part of that. So your ability to treat it as such, and then enhance your infrastructure running in your data center, at the edge, in your office, in your branch, wherever it might be, enhance it with Azure capability, services and management capability. So I'm going to say that's the high level pitch that I give. I started, I think, in February this year at launch, being asked to deliver sessions, and they were for an hour. I have recently got to the point now where I'm being asked to deliver sessions in 20 to 30 minutes on what Azure Stack HCI is. So I've been working on stripping it right down. Does anybody else want to add into what is Azure Stack HCI? No?
Oh, well, Jaromir's on mute.
I muted myself. Okay. So I wanted to add one thing, right? So there are many people that think that Azure Stack HCI is just some kind of appliance with just web GUI or something like that. No, it's I would say same operating system as you know. Looks like Windows Server. If you take a look from outside on this machine, because it's domain joined, and you can manage it with traditional tools like MMC, right, or Server Manager, or anything like that. So for the IT pro who is familiar with Windows Server, it's not new. It's nothing new. It's just not Windows Server, but it has different branding, I would say.
It's definitely that perfect meeting of the two worlds to deliver a truly hybrid product. Like you say, you can use your traditional tools and things that you've been used to, but then also you can start to use Azure and take advantage of Azure as well. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I think rightly said, right? It brings the best of both worlds. Customers who are very comfortable with Azure tooling, so you have it, they can use Azure as a control plane, manage pretty much all of the IT assets which are hosted on Azure Stack HCI. If they're not comfortable using Azure, they can use Windows Admin Center to manage pretty much all of the HCI show on premises, right? Really is best of both worlds, like you really pointed out, Lisa. It's delivered as an Azure service, that's one. And it's treated as a first-class Azure resource. So that's the beauty of it. But if you look at the ways that customers really are perceiving the Azure Stack HCI now, they really don't have to be hopping onto the cloud journey yet. I mean, those customers who are still not ready for the cloud journey, but they have a strategy as a company-wide initiative. They can really lift and shift their existing workloads, which could be on a 3-tier SAN, modernize that into the conversion infrastructure, and really ride the HCI wave. That's where really Microsoft has taken it away.
I also think another key point here is the fact that the operating system is delivered as an Azure service means that it's always up to date, and therefore you remove the pain that we've seen happening time and time again, where you need to upgrade from the likes of 2008, 2012, and that's gone, right? When you've moved to this kind of operating system that's delivered as an Azure service, it's always up to date, like any other cloud service, and therefore you're stepping out of that pain that you got sometimes with upgrading. And I think that's a really cool point as well. But it's Windows Server is still in the mix. It's still available. Windows Server 2022. There was lots of announcements about that as well. Yeah, both still viable options for customers depending on requirements and use cases. And Dell have got the AX nodes that can run both of these operating systems in the best possible way. So let's dig in then to some Ignite announcements. So I've got some notes here, and we're just going to run through some topics, and then I'll get your guys' thoughts on them. If you give us a wee summary of what was announced and then your thoughts, that would be awesome. So the first one up on my list is GPU enablement for machine learning. So Jayanth, what does GPU availability mean for Azure Stack HCI? What are some of the use cases that are being targeted here?
So yeah, this has been on the cards for quite some time, right? So pretty much most of our customers that we talked to were very particular about were asking for, hey, when GPU is going to be enabled on the Azure Stack HCI. So the good news is on with the 21H2, GPU acceleration is going to be provided. So they called it as discrete devices assignment, which is also known as GPU pass-through. What this really means is this allows the Windows Admin Center administrators to dedicate one or more physical GPUs to a particular VM, right? Now, think about it, with the clustered VMs, now they can take advantage of the GPU acceleration and also all the clustering capabilities such as high availability via failover and so on and so forth. So to a question on what are some of the GPU use cases that we're targeting to solve, well, it definitely offers world-class performance for analytics use cases that we're familiar with GPUs. Helps data scientists and researchers to tackle increasingly complex challenges such as facial recognition or image inferencing, manufacturing defect detection, so on, autonomous driving and so on and so forth, right? Just to give you a few use cases, but it could be many use cases that are coming through with GPUs as well. But yes, I mean, GPU brings in a totally different dynamics into this game, into the HCI game, and we're really looking forward to how customers are going to perceive this.
Awesome. Thanks for that update, Jayanth. Really appreciate that. Okay. Anybody want to add anything else on that, or will we jump on? Okay, next up on my list is Kernel Soft Reboot. So who wants to take this one? Give us a little bit of a summary about what it is, and then again, your thoughts. Because I believe this is something that, and I could be wrong here, because remember, I've been out of the game for a while, but I believe that this is something that came from Azure, right? And it kind of is one of the things that demonstrates this benefit of Azure Stack HCI, and the fact that it's delivered as an Azure service now, and we're getting things that have been in Azure and bringing them on-prem, which is quite cool. So Jaromir, Kenny, do you want to take that?
I can if you want.
Okay.
It's a bit of the Azure, right? Because in Azure it works a little bit different. There are sessions with Mark Rusinovich where he was demonstrating this for last probably 2 years now, where he was showing how the Microsoft is patching their hardware in the data centers. So basically, they are able to replace some components while the machine is running. So this is more or less happening in the VMs, in the guests, in Azure edition of Windows Server. The KSR is a little bit different beast. It's more or less like you are able to, instead of rebooting whole server, you are just rebooting the kernel. It's also one of these technologies that is used in Azure. However, there are different types of reboots of the host in Azure. There's one where you just replace the drivers when it's running, just remap it in the memory. One is that you will do this soft reboot. So yes, this is this KSR-ish thing. What is really nice about this, that you can apply software updates, and then you don't have to go to the post of the hardware. So you don't have to see all of these BIOS settings, checks of the RAM, and it boots just much faster. So we in Dell, we have Open Manage extension, and this Open Manage extension has to be also adjusted. So well, imagine that when you will do firmware updates and you need to update the BIOS, what you will do is that you need to skip this KSR. So you can use it, or sometimes you have to skip it, right? Because sometimes you want to also update the firmware of the BIOS or anything that has to do this post reboot. So it's sometimes useful, sometimes you have to skip it. How you configure it? You configure it in cluster updating. I didn't explore much more about this because I would love to see PowerShell command to just reboot the computer and attempt KSR, because this is what you really do. You attempt to KSR. If it doesn't work, you will just go fully reboot. And this is the global configuration for cluster updating. You can configure cluster updating to attempt KSR every time, or I think when you are deploying the updates, you can also say that, yeah, just go KSR or skip KSR, and then you will see it in the PowerShell in the results that it went with the soft reboot or the hard reboot.
Yep, and then just to make it real as well, if you Google kernel soft reboot demo, you'll find a video on YouTube showing a side-by-side comparison of a normal reboot side-by-side with a KSR reboot on a Dell R740 XD server. The normal reboot is about 4 minutes, and the KSR reboot is about 19 seconds. So it's a significant, tangible difference in reboot time.
Drop that link to me so I can put it in the show notes so that people can look at that. That's awesome. Okay, moving down my list of topics to discuss. Next up is dynamic CPU capability. Jayanth, back to you. Tell us, what is dynamic CPU capability? When do we use it?
Well,
tell us all about it.
I'm glad this feature is finally available. I've had customers who have been, clamoring for this particular thing for quite some time now. Think about it, right? So, I mean, we have faced this problem in a realistic world. There are customers whom we have shipped with a particular processor, and then for some reason, they were not able to upgrade, or scale up their nodes, or add more nodes into their clusters for some or the other reason. But they're right now in a stage where they could just go and add those nodes in. But unfortunately, so certain situations, the processor is not available during that time. So what do? So they have a mismatched node, because their studio cluster demands that every node within the cluster has to be homogeneous in nature, including the processor, model, compatibility, everything, right? So I think that particular restriction is now lifted with 21H2. It allows you to kind of mix and match processors within the same HCI cluster. So I think customers are going to really love this. Although there's a caveat to this, you really cannot although you can mix AMD and Intel, but the live migrating of a virtual machine from an Intel processor to an AMD is not supported, live migration. But yeah, you can do an offline migration as well. That should not be a problem. But the intent really is about how do you really move your the customers really want to kind of take advantage of live migrating the virtual machines from one processor to the other, to really take advantage of the new processor capabilities that the processor vendor has to offer. Not just the processor vendor, even the applications today can take advantage of the newer capabilities that are built into the processor. So this is a great move, and I'm sure this is going to be appreciated by many customers.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jayanth. Okay, so next up on my list is, I heard that there was something around the ability to create and manage virtual machines from the Azure portal. So create and manage virtual machines running on Azure Stack HCI from the Azure portal. Kenny?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so many customers out there just now are leveraging Azure just now. They know how to go and deploy a virtual machine, and not just from the Azure portal, but leveraging ARM templates as well, using infrastructure as code, deploying VMs, managing their lifecycle through ARM templates, things like that. And wouldn't it be great if you could bring that same experience to your on-premises workloads as well, and use the same skill sets, the same knowledge and capabilities that you already have? Well, that's largely what is being talked about here, the ability to, when you go to deploy a virtual machine in Azure, choose your Azure Stack HCI as the deployment point for it. When you're creating ARM templates to be able to target your Azure Stack HCI endpoints for the deployment location. So rather than choosing US East or UK South or wherever, you target one of your Azure Stack HCI instances and off you go. Small caveat, it uses its own RP, I think, so it's not using Microsoft.compute, for example, like you would in an Azure ARM template, but largely consistent. And it just shows that this is another step on that journey to cloud consistency that we've been talking about for a long time now. And being able to use Azure as that control plane. And I think IDC don't have control plane as a service, as a category, but maybe they should, because Azure as a universal control plane across all sorts of workloads running in many, many places is a powerful concept. And this is one of those things that Microsoft is really doing a lot just now, is decoupling the service from the control plane and making sure that you can leverage the same capabilities wherever you want. So virtual machines, massive in every cloud, being able to deploy them where you want, where you need, rather than just where Microsoft have a data center, but using that Azure control plane. I think it's awesome.
The ability to use the ARM templates and infrastructure as code to both your virtual machines running in Azure, but also any on-prem, I think is really powerful as well. And is this in preview, currently available, just being looked at? What's the status of this right now?
Certainly announced. I haven't seen it in the Azure portal yet, so I think private preview,
Okay.
but certainly announced, and there were screenshots of it at Ignite. Oh. So, you know, it's in slideware, so definitely real.
Yes. That is super exciting, and that's going to be such a plus for Azure hybrid customers. So I'm excited to see that come out and into fruition. Okay, up next, let's talk about secured core. Jaromir, that is your area. Take it away and tell us all about secured core and why it's exciting.
Right. So let me start a little bit with the history, right? So you maybe remember when the Secure Boot was introduced. The Secure Boot was introduced in Windows 8, and back then the Secure Boot was a set of the technologies, not just a checkbox in the BIOS. Secure Boot composed of two things. One was Trusted Boot and one was Measured Boot. So you basically when you booted the system, the Windows 7 had these issues that you could boot whatever you wanted, right? So a lot of people were, you were making their Windows 7 activated by these pre-boot thingies that you pre-booted something before the Windows, and this was providing for you activation, but the same way you could also boot the malware, right? So for this, Windows 8 introduced the Secure Boot, which was this Measured Boot and Trusted Boot. So Trusted Boot was that you only boot the components you trust. So you had to have a root of the trust. And the root of the trust was Secure Boot setting in the BIOS. So you had to check the checkbox. So the only trusted components were loaded. And the Measured Boot was that you measured every component that was loaded, then compared it with the last reboot. And if it was different, then you basically didn't boot. This kind of Measured Boot was already in the BitLocker. So when you changed something, you just didn't boot, right? Because there was something changed. So, but this was Measured Boot, where you measured each pieces and store it in a PCR record. There was a really, really nice white paper that was published. I can send you a link so you can publish it and you can read about it more. And it was released when the Windows 8 was released. So it's a long time ago. And then the Microsoft started build on top of these technologies. You maybe remember when the Windows 10 introduced virtualization-based security. So basically, you have two different OSs running in one OS, and in this different OS, you can store various processes, right? And one of the processes is that you can store your credentials LSA isolated. So LSA isolated can be a different process in this different VM that is, forked from your main operating system, and it's stored securely next to your operating system. It's Hyper-V based security, so there's a Hyper-V running, and then these two OSs. And even you are administrator, you can do anything to the system. You cannot modify this other OS that is running with these secured processes. So this is another component, right? And there were even more. You can go to the GPOs and open up the, I think it's a device guard, Hive, and there are multiple settings, right, where you can enable, there are multiple components. I don't recall all of these, but this is set of the software settings you can enable. And this is one part, right? And when I was talking with the PMs, I was like, yeah, this sounds to me like it's been there since Windows 10, 1809 or something like that. Yeah, it's been there since ever. But now with Secured Core, you also have the OEM, Dell in this case, who will also commit to enable these functionality in the firmware and the software. So Secure Boot, it's more or less like a branding that the technology is able to run all of these security technologies, and you can safely enable it. And in the end, what you will see, if you'll go to latest Windows Admin Center, you can go to security settings and just enable all of these, right? So you have your secured core, but you can do it only on the validated hardware. I think we have nodes that are validated, or they are going to be validated for secured core. Not every AX configuration, just pay attention to this. Definitely this is the move forward, because you are able to, as we did this measure boot, and you could measure it locally, now you will be able probably and hopefully measure this system against the cloud, and use something like that was used already with shielded VMs. You had with shielded VMs attestation service, you could have 2 servers, 3 servers that were measuring all of these measurements from your servers, and were able to measure if the system is healthy without any malware or component that is booting there. And yes, hopefully we will see more things on secured core systems.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So basically, it was just the bringing together of a whole bunch of great security features and enabling those, and then linking those up with the OEMs for Azure Stack HCI. That is pretty awesome. Thank you so much, Jaromir. Right, next up on the top, there was quite a lot, right? And there was actually quite a lot in Ignite for Azure Stack HCI, which is great. Okay, let's go on to... Right, let's go. Next is, there's a few different things I think in this, in terms of Azure Arc, and the deep and native is the description, the deep and native integration with Azure Arc and Azure Stack HCI, and the sort of Arc-enabled management extensions that are now coming for Azure Stack HCI. So a question I've kind of been asking for maybe since release really is, why would someone use Azure Stack HCI over Arc and another infrastructure? And it's not necessarily that I'm saying why is Azure Stack HCI better than Arc plus another, because Arc plus another may very well be what is right for the customer. But I was trying to understand really clearly the difference, and if there was any benefits of going, full in with Azure Stack HCI. And I think this Ignite definitely started to build on that, right? Because we're seeing now that we've always known that Arc is integrated into Azure Stack HCI, but now we're seeing more and more come to that. So in terms of the Arc-enabled management extensions for Azure Stack HCI, does someone want to give us a rundown, Kenny, maybe, of kind of what was talked about there?
I can certainly try. So there are a bunch, this is a question we get all the time. Why would I buy Azure Stack HCI or deploy on Azure Stack HCI versus any other HCI system when I can just put Azure Arc over the top of all of them? Isn't it just the same? Well, some things are the same, but more and more we're seeing this deep and native integration with Azure Arc and Azure Stack HCI just inherently built into the platform. So when you deploy, the Arc agents are there, inherent and installed, and enabling a whole bunch of new features and functionality. So One of those things is being able to deploy extensions to your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure from the Azure portal and enable certain features and functionality. So for example, being able to enable the Microsoft monitoring agent, so Azure Monitor, to monitor your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. That's in public preview now. That was announced, and you can play with that right now, very easily pushing out that MMA extension to your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. Being able to use Windows Admin Center in the portal, so WAC in Azure, I think as it's called, rather than having to have Windows Admin Center running on premises or running on your laptop or wherever. You can use all the features, including OEM extensions and other extensions, from Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal to manage your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure there. So again, that idea of Azure as the control plane, and using whatever tooling and features and functionality that you need there. Enabling Azure Site Recovery, so enabling disaster recovery for your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure through a management extension. So log on to the Azure portal, go to the Azure Arc management blade there, go to Azure Stack HCI in there, choose your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure object, and push the Azure Site Recovery agent to that. And that object inside the Azure portal will push it down to the Azure Arc agents on your Azure Stack HCI nodes, which will then take care of deploying those and maintaining those on each of your Azure Stack HCI nodes there on premises as well, with no workload interruption. So just as easy to enable disaster recovery for an Azure Stack HCI infrastructure as for an Azure infrastructure effectively, and leveraging Azure extensions to do that as well. I think there are some others planned as well, maybe around auto manage and some ability to run PowerShell remotely as well. So log into the Azure portal and push PowerShell commands down to your Azure Stack HCI hosts. And this is just the tip of the spear, right? This is the start of a whole host of new features and functionality, which takes Azure Arc, Azure Stack HCI, and just brings them closer together and makes them work better together. So exciting to see these announced. Again, I think just the monitoring, the MMA agent extension is in public preview just now. All the others are either in development or private preview, but good to see where we're going and what the roadmap ahead looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was kind of hounding you guys with this question, I think it was Michael Wells who was describing to me that basically if you think about, so another HCI platform using Azure Arc, really you're integrating at the workload and the VM level. But with Azure Stack HCI, you're integrating right down to the cluster level. So you've got like full control and deep integration there. And that kind of really helped paint a picture in my head. And then these sort of new announcements that have come are really showing why you know, if you're all in on Azure, if you're all in on Azure, and that then Azure Stack HCI is probably the way to go. Okay, awesome. And then last but not least, Azure Virtual Desktop for Azure Stack HCI. Kenny, back to you. But also, guys, if you want to jump in, just jump in.
Yeah. Oh, this one is really exciting. I think it's probably the biggest announcement that we had at Ignite for Azure Stack HCI, to be honest. People have been hounding us for this feature. We have no control over this, but they've been hounding us for this feature for a long time now, especially over the last 18 months plus. Because as more and more people have been working from home, companies have been turning to Azure Virtual Desktop in Azure to deliver VDI for their employees. It's been a massive ramp up for AVD inside public Azure, but that comes with challenges as well. So challenges around latency, data sovereignty, cost as well, to be honest, in some cases, being able to effectively manage that. So what AVD and Azure Stack HCI is basically, again, it's that idea of Azure as the control plane. The AVD service still lives within Azure, but now you have the option to deploy your workload VMs to your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. And you still manage the AVD experience in the same way from within Azure. So you get that cloud control plane, exactly as you would if you were deploying those VDI workloads into an Azure data center, but now they run where you need them to. So if you need your data to be close to your end users or to other systems on premises, you need that low latency. You need to bring it to where the data is or where the customer is. You can do that. We also had announcements around Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session hosts as well within there. So that is that's something which has been cried out for as well. And again, it's another unique thing that you get in VDI through Azure Stack HCI and AVD on Azure Stack HCI here. So you have Windows 10 and 11 multi-session in AVD in public Azure. Now we get that in Azure Stack HCI, which is awesome. And probably one of the, I want to say it's exciting, but it's not. You'd think it should be there, but it's not always, is RDP short path. So the ability for your connection from your client to the session host to be direct, to be a direct connection, rather than having to go through Azure and back is there. And that means that you do get advantage of that low latency access to the workload where it's running as well. And we spoke earlier about the ability to deploy VMs from the Azure portal into Azure Stack HCI as well. That'll apply to VDI VMs as well. So you want to deploy a new Windows 10 multi-session VM onto your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure, go to the Azure portal, deploy it from there, configure it through the AVD management plane in Azure, and there you go, up and running, full end-to-end VDI experience, all from the Azure portal there. So very excited by that. That's in public preview now, and eagerly awaiting future developments around that as well. Worth noting, one thing we don't have just now within Azure Stack HCI is GPU partitioning. So the ability to share one GPU with multiple VMs. That's another thing which is really going to explode the use cases for AVD on Azure Stack HCI when that becomes available.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Kenny. Well, that is everything I had on my list. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys, and giving us an update on the Ignite announcements and your thoughts. Any final things to share on Azure Stack HCI, what we're most excited about?
I'm excited about Azure Stack HCI is just an Azure, right? So all the AVD, you can run it because it's Azure. You can run it on Azure. You can have extended support on Azure, and you can also have it on your Azure on-prem, which is Azure Stack HCI, because it's Azure. So this is what I'm excited about mostly.
Yeah, I'm excited about going and facing the customers head on, saying, yeah, we have VDI solutions now natively built in. So I hate to kind of do this all the time, saying, yeah, you need to look for third-party solutions. So that's not the case. So really awesome.
VDI seems to be a top favorite here. I think that's the one that everyone was waiting on.
There are so many benefits and things that I'm excited about. I mean, just the fact that there is an Azure app for your mobile phone, and then because your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure is an Azure service, when you log on to the Azure app on your phone, you can manage and monitor those services on Azure Stack HCI. It's just these just out-of-the-box benefits and features that you get by leveraging, again, control plane to control your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. There is just, it's super powerful.
It's really interesting to see when you think about it. So Microsoft, Hyper-V playing at the virtualization and hypervisor game, then went into Azure and we're playing at the, cloud platform game at AWS, GCP. It's like they've taken themselves into another level, almost all by themselves. And they are now, Azure isn't just a Microsoft data center. Azure is a control plane, services, capability, and they want to bring that to workloads wherever they reside, whether that is your Azure Stack HCI on-prem or via Arc, a virtual machine running in AWS, or a VxRail in your data center, or a PowerFlex in your data center. Because FYI, most of Dell's top products are validated for Azure Arc now. And I think that is just so cool. And also, I think it's something that people are struggling to get their heads around. If you've not been in the Azure space, and especially if you've not been on this journey with them from Azure Stack from the beginning, to see it all kind of like go through and make sense, it's been somewhat frustrating at times. But it's definitely been worth it. So yeah, I'm very excited about just where this is headed. I'm excited for the fact that updates will be far more regular than they have been for sort of Windows Server as an operating system. So yeah, I think we're all excited. I think that's the conclusion. And we're going to get ourselves back together again next month, because this has obviously been very focused on the Ignite announcements and from the Microsoft perspective, but I want to bring us back together next month to do a roundup of what we as Dell have done with our integrated system for Azure Stack HCI over the last year, because since launch in February, we have continued to provide updates, and we've continued to update our Open Manage integration with Windows Admin Center. That's really, really strong. So yeah, hopefully we'll come back together next month and we'll cover all the Dell announcements. But I just want to say thanks again, guys, for joining me on my first YouTube in a while and providing the support. I appreciate it.
Oh, anytime.
Awesome. Thank you.
And we'll see you again next month. See you later.
Bye for now.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.